What is up, everybody? My name is Yehuda Tenenbaum. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited that you tuned in today. I have some exciting news, and we're going to be talking about some cool concepts. First of all, some housekeeping. It's been a little bit of time since I published an episode. I've had a lot of things in the works, and today is sort of that transition announcement. So what used to be called The People Behind the Books is now going to be called Tax Tech Simplified. How to run the firm you want using tech to actually help you along the way. Very often people will implement a new tech solution, and before they know it, they've concocted a whole system of a bunch of tools that sort of connect together and sort of work. And now they implemented a new system in order to solve 5 problems, and now they have 6 problems. We're going to be focused on talking about tech solutions, talking about how to properly utilize tech in a way that's going to help you build your firm and help you run the firm you want, depending on your situation, because everybody runs their firm differently. You know, some people are a solo practice. Some people have a few employees. Some people want to work the whole year. Some people don't want to work the whole year. I think most people don't want to work the whole year, but it's a matter of what type of firm you're going to build. You know, some people like doing an intense tax season and then going straight into the rest of the year and relaxing. And some people like not having a tax season and just, you know, doing things throughout the year. So that's really what we're going to be focused on. We're still going to do interviews with tax pros. You know, we're going to try to gear the questions towards how they run their firms specifically with tech. I have some interviews that I've already done that I'm still going to publish. So, you know, keep on coming back. I'm going to be publishing those episodes in the next couple of weeks. I'm really excited about this shift. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm super into tech in general, and then specifically tech in the tax world. I'm sort of a little bit addicted to doing demos of different softwares, which is something I have to stop doing because I have a lot of work to do. So I don't have time always to do demos, but I absolutely love doing demos and going to conferences and exhibit halls and seeing the latest advancements in tech and accounting tech and tax tech. It's amazing to see what's coming up. I think over the past year and a half or so, really like brand new categories of tech have just emerged that did not exist in the past. You know, not your grandmother's tax firm for sure. You know, it's interesting because taxes have taken from a technology perspective, it's been an interesting timeline. Like we had that discussion with Phyllis Joe Kuby, and if you didn't listen to that episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to it. But she talked about how experiencing e-filing for the first time, and that was, you know, the previous generation, and now this generation is implementing AI workflow tools that again did not exist a few years ago. So, you know, we're talking about like AI tax research tools, AI tax workflow tools to like enter data into tax returns, create work papers. There's another genre, I guess you could call it, of software like accounting agents. So an example of that is Intuit Intelligence inside of QuickBooks. Another example of that is Ramp Stack. There's another company that I recently heard about called Accrue, spelled with 2 Qs. You know, I would say for sure worthwhile checking all of them out. But it just sort of speaks to where we are in the world where there's just so much brand new technology. So my goal with this podcast is, just like the title says, Tax Tech Simplified. We're going to talk about the tax tech and accounting tech that's going on in the world, and we're just going to simplify it because, believe it or not, it's a lot more simple than you would believe. I mean, sales reps have a tendency to say, you know, they want things to be really complicated and super powerful, and that sort of ends up messing with our brains a little bit because then it's super intimidating. And so I'm going to be talking about different concepts in order for you to know, where am I supposed to go in this whole journey of implementing tax tech so it's actually useful. So today I'm going to be focusing on specifically on our tech stack. A tech stack is something which very often is not built intentionally. And what I mean by that is not that you're not building with intention, but very often people will start their tax firms and it's very like haphazard. Like, oh, I just started doing, this is me. This was my story back in, I think it was 2018. I decided I wanted to do taxes after doing my own and getting into it and learning about it. And little by little, I just said, okay, let me start with a couple friends. I got tax software. I got a PTIN, an EFIN, an EIN, all the acronyms I needed. And, I started doing my first few tax returns. I didn't have right away. I didn't have a practice management system. I didn't have a process. I didn't have systems in place. Like there was nothing, there was no architect behind everything I was doing. So I think it's important to, especially now, right now we're in the month of August. If you're listening to this a little bit later, hopefully it's not, tax season just yet, but it's certainly worth a listen to, even if it is January, right before tax season. Now is the perfect time to implement new processes and new tech. Now is the time to evaluate new tech and to make sure we don't go into tax season with what I call new kitchen syndrome. New kitchen syndrome is when you buy a house or you move into a new apartment, one or the other, and you walk into the kitchen and you need a fork, and you open one drawer and it's not there, and you open the other drawer and it's not there, and you're sort of stuck in this weird limbo state where you don't know where anything is. And that's what happens when you implement new tech, and you don't have time to get adjusted to it. Is you end up suffering from new kitchen syndrome and you don't know where anything is. I had this past tax season. I started using ProConnect full time for the first time in my firm, and I didn't know where any of the inputs were. And it took me time to figure it out. And I specifically remember there were times where I spent probably a couple hours between, searching myself and also with support, which is, sometimes more helpful than other times, trying to find one little thing inside the program and, not even sure if it's there. And then eventually I found it and I was like, oh, it was just a checkbox right in this random tab over here. I wish I had known that. So, now is the time to be implementing things. So we're going to talk about your tech stack. I would say this is obviously you're just listening to this or watching this, but this is meant to be interactive in the sense that I'm giving you homework to do. Right now, what I'm talking about, I want you to actually sit down and write and think about what I'm talking about, and that way you can implement it in your own firm. So let's just first define what a tech stack is, because it's easy to get confused between processes, systems, an SOP, standard operating procedure, a tech stack, technology, practice management system. These are all a lot of almost like buzzwords, but each one has their place. So a tech stack is any technology that touches your process. And I think this is an important distinction, is your process is not your tech stack. Just like your practice management system is a tool to utilize to complete work. It is not the work itself, right? So let's define that. Again, the tech stack is anything that touches your process. And I mean, this really goes back to people are going to ask, well, what is my process? And that's a good question. Maybe for another time, we'll talk more about process. But anything that touches, any technology that touches your process, so sales and marketing, intake, tax engine of we're going to go through this, of actually getting the work done, delivery, proposals, invoices, all of these items, these are things that all touch your process and they're part of your tech stack. And the goal of what we're trying to build is in a well-oiled machine of a tech stack is that all those things should work, number one, in tandem. They should work well together, right? So that has to do with integrations. That has to do with your workflow setup. But also, you shouldn't be paying for two softwares to do the same thing. I recently was at a conference and I was speaking to someone and she was saying, yeah, we have an old server in the office and we use TaxDome, but we're going to go pay for Smart Vault, which is another file management system. And I said to her, why would you do that? Just put it in TaxDome. And she looked at me and said, well, you can make folders before 2023. She didn't realize that TaxDome has unlimited storage and the folders are completely customizable. Again, it's tricky. There's so many parts to these technologies, which is why we're here. simplifying them. But again, anything that touches your tech stack, you don't want to be duplicating things. You don't want to be using systems that don't interact with each other. You want to create a tech stack that actually works. So while you may have built your tech stack up until now without intention, what we're talking about today is how can we go back and actually do this with intention. So first of all, let's talk about what is inside of a tech stack. I mentioned this before. The key over here is literally everything. If it's on your computer, if you utilize it at any point, it is part of your tech stack. I think sometimes we tend to be like, Linktree. I use that on the side. I sometimes will send that to people, so it's not really part. No, that's part of your tech stack, and it's important because if you miss out and don't go ahead and include things, you won't give yourself the opportunity to make sure you're not duplicating things. We're going to start all the way from the beginning, which is marketing or client acquisition, right? Which is the beginning of any system, right? You have to get the clients in the door somehow. So some examples of this would be MailChimp. It would be your website. It would be an intake form. Maybe you're using Typeform or Cognito Forms, or maybe you built your own form. A cool thing is you can use Claude Code to build a website. And there's a website called web3forms.com where you can actually grab an API key, and then you can build your own custom form using AI, like Claude Code, and you can code it, put it on the website, and then anyone can fill out that form and it'll go directly to your email. Something like that. Also, you don't never want to accept, personally identifying information. So it would only be like simple things like name and email or what are you here for. To always keep that in mind. Once they're a client, then things go into a secure system. But marketing would include any of that, client acquisitions. It would also include if you have company social media pages, or if you post on your personal Facebook page or something like that. That would be included in your tech stack. And that's important because sometimes your software can actually integrate with your social media. And again, that's important to know, because if you don't include it, then it's not there to systematize and to optimize, right? The next thing, once you get that client, then they're going to go inside your practice management system. So examples of this would be something like TaxDome, Carbon, Canopy, and there's like a million others. Some people use general purpose ones like Asana or ClickUp. I personally would recommend TaxDome. That's the one that I use. I know there's a lot of others that are specific to accounting and tax. And I'd say if you're starting out your tax firm today, this would be great to listen to figure out what can I build so I can build it with intention, right? So practice management, everything that organizes and touches the client. Now, sometimes that's going to be one main system. Like TaxDome can do a ton of anything that touches the client, plus internal organization. But sometimes people will want to start light. And so they'll do something like get Ignition or Anchor to process proposals. And then maybe they'll, do workflow inside something like QBO, because that's just how they run their firm. If you're using ProConnect, you can actually build the invoice directly inside of ProConnect, and that can all go through into its system. Questionable whether or not you want to do that, but I'm saying, again, there's so many options, which is a good thing and simultaneously makes it really complicated. That's practice management systems. I would say that's number 2. So marketing, practice management. And then the third thing in this list is what I call the engines. That's where the work actually happens. So an example of that would be your tax software, right? Which, by the way, some tax softwares try to be practice management systems. And based on what I've seen thus far, they don't do a good job. They do a pretty good job at tax returns, some better than others. Put down in the comments what your favorites are. But they're not good at practice management systems also, which is a reason I would say it might be worthwhile to go ahead and have those as completely separate things. Again, there's pros and cons to each. We can talk about that in the future. So the engine is where the work actually happens. ProConnect, UltraTax, OLT Pro, Drake, CCH Access. These are just examples of different tax softwares. And then, maybe on the bookkeeping side, you'll have things like QuickBooks Online, Xero. Again, that's where the work actually happens. And then the last category, the fourth category, I would call is all the supporting programs. So let's say you edit PDFs in Adobe Acrobat. Maybe you use Word and Excel. If you don't use Excel, what are you doing? Or maybe you're just using Google Docs and Google Sheets, which is perfectly acceptable in my view. All those supporting programs are what sort of powers, I'd say, your tech stack and your ability to do everything else. It's work, but not the main work. The main work is the tax engine. And nowadays also, like I mentioned before, you have all these new tools, like workflow tools like Juno, Magnetic, Blackor, Paloma, Byron. I'm forgetting a few. Let's see how many more I could name. Filed is another example. These are all like automation workflow tools to get the tax documents and work papers completed and then into the tax software and reviewed. Which again, this is a whole new category. So that's sort of like an assist to the engine. So I would say it's like half supporting program and half engine because it sort of does some of the work itself. But those are the four categories. So marketing, practice management, the engines where the work happens, and then the supporting programs. Now what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to link a resource in the show notes that you could, a Google sheet that you could copy and use this to write down. So go to the comments right now, click on that link, make a copy, and let's talk through this together. So it's a Google sheet, and inside of it is an opportunity for you to write down every piece of software that you use, right? And this is step one, right? I call it dissecting your tech stack because step one is just to know what there is. Before you can optimize, you have to assess what actually is even there, because I would venture to say, and please in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably have way more software than you realize. You have way more tech than you even realize. One time I was signing up for some service and it asked a question of how many apps are on your phone. And I remember thinking, oh, probably like 50, 60. And then I went on my phone and I had something like 250 apps. I think our minds, we'll get another app, we'll get another piece of tech, and we don't realize how many it is. Like, so sit down right now and start listing out, right? I could off the top of my head, and this is an exercise I did for myself. Right now, my tech stack includes TaxDome, ProConnect, Adobe Acrobat, Juno, but also things like Microsoft Office, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Google Sheets, Google Docs. I also use Google Voice. I use Fireflies for meeting notes. I use Claude and ChatGPT, as everyone does, right? These are all part of the tech stack, but it's easy to only think of the tax software, right? So step one is just to sit down and figure it out and start categorizing. And in this sheet, there's already pre-made drop downs where you can go ahead and use this to categorize what belongs in each category. And sometimes they overlap, by the way. So I have subcategories and also main categories, and you can choose more than one, because sometimes, something like TaxDome, it does intake and it also does delivery. It does proposals, and it also does document storage and communication. So these are all things that that sort of go together. And then once you have that, we can start optimizing, which I think is going to be a future episode. Please put in the comments, like, how did you do? Just write a number. How many pieces of software are you using? I think the number would surprise you. But I want to just to conclude some best practices, and this is sort of the optimization that we're going to eventually work on. But today is just writing down everything. And by the way, part of optimizing is also writing your standard operating procedures, and you can't do that unless you actually know everything that you use. So first of all, best practices, everything inside of your tech stack should be properly built, right? With intention. When I was a kid, I remember there were always times where I needed to convert files. It's a lot less of a thing nowadays, although it still happens here and there, where like you need to convert an MP4 file to a .mov file. And so you would Google online, like MP4 to MOV converter, download some sketchy software for like a one-time use because you needed to put it into some other software. You needed to send it to someone. And who knows if that software was like actually malware or not. And I'd venture to say things like this happen in tax firms, unfortunately, probably all the time. And from a security perspective, it's not a good idea. A tip, by the way, in figuring out how many apps you have just on your computer, let's say installed, you can right click on, if you're using Windows, on the window icon, like the start, right click on the window icon that opens the start menu. It opens up a separate menu, and the top option is installed apps, and it will bring you straight to your installed apps to figure out how many years of Drake do you have installed on your computer. Do you really need 2015 Drake still installed on your laptop? Probably not. Maybe it's time to take that off. And by the way, again, optimization is about the tech stack, but it's also about the tech that you're using. Your laptop and your desktop can only handle so much, and you probably have a ton of stuff that could be uninstalled from a long time ago. Another best practice is don't duplicate unless there's a need to duplicate, right? We don't want overlapping software, but sometimes you do. I'll give you an example for my tech stack. I use Taxtome, and I simultaneously keep client files in Google Drive. Now, for a couple different reasons. Reason number one is simple, backup, right? If something happened to Taxtome, I think we'd have bigger issues. I don't think anything is happening to Taxtome, but I have to protect myself, right? And my clients. If something did happen to Taxtome, where would all my client files be? So I copy client files to Google Drive. Partially that's because that's what I did before I even had Taxtome. So my process is a little bit of a vestige of the past. So I probably could at some point figure out a way to update this. But for now, that's what it is, and that's okay. It works. But I have everything inside of Google Drive as well for a couple different reasons. Right. Number one is backup. Number two is because Google Sheets and Google Docs can only live inside of a Google Drive. So if I want to share, let's say, a Google Sheet with a client, ask them some questions on a sheet, right? Or share a sheet with them that we could work on together. I have to do that inside of a Google Drive. So it's just easier for organization purposes. And then also, I find Google Drive to just open up on desktop very reliably. Taxtome does have a desktop feature where you can have it inside of the Windows Explorer. It does work pretty well, although just I find Google Drive to work a little more reliable, which is not surprising. You know, you're talking about companies' orders of magnitude difference in size. But again, you don't want to do it just because that's what you did. You should always be reevaluating, is this the right thing? And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is all-in-one tools versus single-use software. So I talked about this earlier, how sometimes people will start their firm a little lighter, and they'll go ahead and, let's say, use a proposal software. And maybe you're using a proposal software even when you have a full practice management system because you feel like that proposal software is better, right? So there's always reasons to do different things. But if there's anything you take from this is I want you building your tech stack with intention, right? Because when you build with intention, you can actually accomplish things. So, I would say that really is the concluding theme of everything we talked about today is get your list of your tech down. That way you can start optimizing and building with intention, because a tech stack built with intention is one where you're going to be able to thrive in your firm. You're going to be able to rely on the technology that you build, and you're actually going to have a good time doing it. Because again, the tech is supposed to work for you. You are not a slave to checking boxes. The tech is supposed to work for you and accomplish the tasks that you're trying to accomplish in a way that you want to accomplish it. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please make sure to subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast platform. Please make sure to follow the show and leave a 5-star rating, because it will greatly help people finding the show and getting this information out to the world, because this is a game changer. So you're helping other people and helping other people in the profession by liking the show. So really, really appreciate you listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Leave a comment. Go to taxtechsimplified.com. You can find my information there. Looking forward to hearing from all of you and seeing what interesting and cool stuff we can come up with, because there's always a cool thing to optimize. And And tell me about your tech stack. Put in the comments, what's your tech stack look like? Is it small? Is it big? Do you have a million things? I want to hear from you. So please reach out and keep on building your tech stack with intention. And we'll see you on the next one.